Olivia Mason was almost invisible at Westlake High School. She walked through the crowded hallways like a ghost, her eyes down, her books hugged tight against her chest. No one noticed her, and she liked it that way. Olivia had learned long ago that being noticed often led to trouble. At 17, she was in her final year of high school. She had perfect grades and had never gotten in trouble, not even once. Her teachers knew her as the quiet girl who always turned in her homework on time and raised her hand only when she knew the exact right answer. Her daily routine never changed. Olivia arrived at school 20 minutes early to avoid the morning rush. She sat in the front row of every class, ate lunch alone in the back corner of the library, and walked home alone. On weekends, she stayed in her room reading books or working on her computer. Olivia had no real friends at school. Sometimes she talked with Mrs. Abbott, the kind old librarian who saved new science books for her. But that was it. Her parents worried about her being alone so much, but they didn't push too hard. They understood that their daughter was different, brilliant, but shy. Not everyone needs to be the center of attention, her father often said. He was a retired army man who had worked in intelligence. He had taught Olivia chess and coding when she was just 8 years old. Sometimes the quiet ones change the world. The trouble began on a normal Tuesday in October when 3 new students transferred to Westlake High. Eric Johnson, Pete Williams, and Kyle Davis arrived like a storm. By lunchtime, everyone knew their names. They were all seniors like Olivia, but unlike her, they commanded attention. They were loud and rough. They swore in the hallways and laughed when teachers told them to stop. Eric, the tallest one with spiky blonde hair, seemed to be their leader. Pete was muscular with a shaved head, while Kyle was shorter with dark curly hair and a permanent smirk. Olivia first noticed them during her history class when Mr. Peterson introduced Eric and Kyle to the class. They slouched in their seats at the back of the room, making jokes and ignoring the lesson. Olivia did what she always did. She focused on her work and tried to blend into the background. For 2 days, Olivia managed to avoid the new boys. But on Thursday, her luck ran out in the cafeteria. She had just gotten her lunch and was heading to the library when someone bumped into her from behind. Her tray tilted and her milk carton fell, splashing open on the floor. "Watch where you're going," a voice said. Olivia looked up to see Eric standing there, his own lunch tray in his hands. Some of the milk had splashed onto his new shoes. "I'm sorry," Olivia said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. You got milk on my new Nikes." Eric cut her off, looking down at his shoes with a frown. By now, Pete and Kyle had joined him. Students nearby grew quiet, watching the scene unfold. Olivia felt her face grow hot as all eyes turned to her. "I said I'm sorry," she repeated, bending down to pick up her fallen tray. "It was an accident." Eric stepped closer. "Sorry doesn't clean my shoes, does it?" Olivia froze, unsure what to say. In all her years at Westlake, no one had ever spoken to her like this. She kept her eyes down, wishing she could disappear. "Leave her alone, Eric," someone said from across the cafeteria. It was Sam Rivera, the editor of the school newspaper. "It was just an accident." Eric glanced at Sam, then back at Olivia. For a moment, it seemed like he might walk away. Instead, he leaned down until his face was close to hers. "You'll pay for that," he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold. "Nobody messes with me, especially not some nobody." Pete and Kyle laughed behind him. Eric straightened up and walked away, but not before deliberately stepping on Olivia's fallen sandwich. The cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level. A lunch lady came over with a mop, looking annoyed. Olivia mumbled another apology and fled to the bathroom, her appetite gone. She locked herself in a stall and took deep breaths, waiting for her heart to stop racing. "It's nothing," she told herself. "They'll forget about it by tomorrow." But they didn't forget. The next morning, Olivia arrived at school early as usual. The hallways were nearly empty as she walked to her locker. When she reached it, she stopped cold. Someone had written the word "nobody" across her locker in black marker. With shaking hands, Olivia opened her locker. Inside, Her books had been pulled from their neat stack and tossed around. Her carefully organized notes were scattered on her English notebook. Someone had drawn crude pictures. Olivia quickly gathered her things, trying to straighten her papers. She needed to get to class before other students arrived and saw the mess. As she reached for her math textbook, a small group of boys rounded the corner. Eric, Pete, and Kyle stopped when they saw her. "Well, look who's here early," Eric said, grinning. "The nobody." Pete laughed. "Did you like our artwork?" Olivia said nothing. She grabbed her backpack and tried to walk past them, but Kyle stepped in her way. "It's rude to ignore people when they talk to you," he said. "Please let me pass," Olivia said quietly. "I need to get to class." "We're just being friendly," Eric said, leaning against the lockers. "Isn't that right, boys? We're welcoming the nobody to our circle." Olivia clutched her backpack tighter. "My name is Olivia." "Oh, it speaks," Pete laughed. Just then, a classroom door opened down the hall and Mr. Peterson stepped out. He looked their way, and the boys immediately backed off. "This isn't over," Eric whispered as Olivia hurried past. Throughout the day, Olivia felt their eyes on her. For the first time in years, she was visible at school, but for all the wrong reasons. During English class, someone threw a paper ball at her head when the teacher wasn't looking. In the hallway between classes, Kyle bumped into her hard enough to make her drop her books. By lunchtime, Olivia was exhausted from the tension. Instead of going to the cafeteria, she went straight to the library, her safe place. Mrs. Abbott noticed her red eyes but didn't ask questions. She just patted Olivia's hand and brought her a granola bar from her desk drawer. "Rough day?" the librarian asked gently. Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. "You know," Mrs. Abbott said, sitting down beside her, "I've been watching students come and go for 30 years, and I've learned something important." Olivia looked up, waiting. "Sometimes," Mrs. Abbott continued, "the quietest voices carry the most weight when they finally speak up." Olivia wiped her eyes. "I don't want trouble. I just want to be left alone." "I understand," Mrs. Abbott said. "But remember this. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes the quietest people have the strongest minds." After school, Olivia walked home quickly, constantly looking over her shoulder. When she finally reached her house, she ran up to her room and closed the door. For the first time in her life, she dreaded going to school the next day. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Olivia thought about Mrs. Abbott's words. The quietest voices, the strongest minds. She had always used her intelligence for schoolwork, for getting perfect grades. She had never thought about using it any other way. "You'll pay for that," Eric had said. Olivia turned over in bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Tomorrow would be worse, she knew it. This was just the beginning. What she didn't know yet was that it would also be the beginning of something else, something that would change everything at Westlake High School. Because while Olivia Mason might be quiet, she was far from helpless. And those boys had just made a very big mistake. The next day was worse, just as Olivia had feared. She arrived at school early as usual, hoping to avoid Eric and his friends. But they must have figured out her routine because they were waiting near her locker. "There she is," Pete said when he spotted her. "Little Miss Nobody." Olivia took a deep breath and walked toward her locker, keeping her eyes down. Maybe if she ignored them, they would get bored and leave her alone. "Did you clean your locker?" Kyle asked with a smirk. "We spent a lot of time decorating it for you." Olivia said nothing. She opened her locker and tried to focus on getting her books for her first class. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she did her best to hide it. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Kyle said, stepping closer. "Leave me alone," Olivia said quietly, still not looking at them. "I haven't done anything to you." Eric laughed. "You ruined my new shoes. Those cost me $80. "It was an accident," Olivia said, "and I already said I was sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it," Eric replied. He reached over and knocked her math textbook out of her hands. It fell to the floor with a loud thud. Olivia bent down to pick it up, but Pete kicked it, sending it sliding down the hallway. Several students walking by saw what happened, but no one stepped in to help. They just hurried past, not wanting to become targets themselves. Olivia felt a lump forming in her throat. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She walked down the hall and picked up her book, then headed to her first class without returning to her locker. "See you later, nobody," Eric called after her. Throughout the morning, the harassment continued. In history class, someone threw spitballs at the back of her head. During the break between classes, she found cruel notes stuffed into her backpack. At lunch, she didn't even try to go to the cafeteria. She went straight to the library and hid in the far corner with a granola bar she'd brought from home. Mrs. Abbott noticed her again, but didn't say anything this time. She just brought Olivia a cup of tea and patted her shoulder before walking away. Olivia was grateful for the small kindness. After school, Olivia was putting her books in her backpack when she overheard a girl talking to her friend nearby. "Did you see that Instagram account they made? The one about the nobody girl? It's so mean." Olivia froze. Instagram account? She pulled out her phone and searched her name. Nothing came up. Then she tried Westlake Nobody and found it immediately. An account called Westlake Nobody had been created just that morning. It already had over 100 followers, most of them students from her school. The account had only 3 posts so far. The first was a photo of her locker with the word "nobody" written on it. The second was a picture of her sitting alone in class, clearly taken without her knowledge. The caption read, "Has anyone ever heard her speak?" The third was worst of all, a close-up of her face looking upset, probably from earlier that day. The caption said, "Nobody, nobody, nobody." Olivia felt sick to her stomach. She put her phone away, grabbed her backpack, and ran out of the school building. She didn't stop running until she reached her house. Once inside, she locked herself in her room and finally let the tears come. How had things gotten so bad so quickly? Just 3 days ago, she had been invisible in the best way, had left alone to do her work and live her life. Now she was invisible in the worst way, seen by everyone but treated like she didn't matter. After crying for a while, Olivia washed her face and sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop and checked the Instagram account again. Now there were 5 posts, including a video of Kyle imitating the way she walked, hunched over with her books clutched to her chest. Students could be heard laughing in the background. Olivia's sadness was slowly turning into something else, something hot and tight in her chest. She was angry. She had never done anything to these boys. She had never done anything to anyone. She just wanted to be left alone. She thought about telling her parents, but what could they do? Call the school? That would only make things worse. The boys would say it was just jokes, just fun. And then they would torment her even more for being a snitch. She thought about telling a teacher, but the same problem applied. Besides, teachers never seemed to really stop bullying. They just made speeches about kindness that everyone ignored. No, Olivia would have to handle this herself. But how? She wasn't strong like Pete. She wasn't popular like Eric. She wasn't good with clever comebacks like Kyle. Her strength had always been her mind. Could that be enough? The next day was Friday. Olivia almost pretended to be sick to avoid school, but she knew that would only delay the inevitable, so she got up, got dressed, and went to school, bracing herself for whatever might happen. The morning was actually better than she expected. Eric, Pete, and Kyle seemed to be leaving her alone. Maybe they had gotten bored already. Maybe they had found a new target. Olivia began to relax a little as she headed to her science class. She had been working on a special project for the state science competition for months. It was a study on water purification using a new filtering method she had designed herself. Her science teacher, Mr. Garner, had been so impressed that he had given her special permission to set up her experiment in the classroom instead of having to take it down each day. The state competition was in 2 weeks, and Olivia was almost ready. As she turned the corner to the science hallway, she saw a small crowd gathered outside Mr. Garner's classroom. There was water all over the floor, and the sound of Mr. Garner's angry voice carried down the hall. Who did this? Who would do such a thing? Olivia pushed through the crowd and stopped dead in her tracks. Her science project was destroyed. The water tanks were tipped over, soaking her careful notes and diagrams. The filter systems she had built were smashed. Glass tubes lay broken on the floor, and the special bacteria cultures she had been growing were dumped out. Months of work, ruined in minutes. Mr. Garner was trying to salvage what he could, but it was clear that most of it was beyond repair. When he saw Olivia standing there, he stopped. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I don't know who did this. I stepped out for just a minute to make copies." Olivia couldn't speak. She just stared at the destruction of her work. Then she heard laughing from the back of the crowd. She turned to see Eric, Pete, and Kyle standing there, watching her reaction with big smiles on their faces. "Oops," Eric said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Guess you should watch where you leave your stuff." Mr. Garner looked at the boys with suspicion. "Do you know something about this?" "Us?" Kyle put on an innocent face. "We just got here, same as everyone else." "Yeah," Pete added. Maybe nobody should have been more careful with her project. They laughed again at their private joke. Olivia felt the hot anger rising in her chest again, stronger than before. Later that day, she sat in Principal Norris's office. He was a balding man with kind eyes but not much backbone. "Without proof, there's nothing I can do," he said, looking genuinely sorry. "No one saw who did it." "It was Eric Johnson, Pete Williams, and Kyle Davis," Olivia said firmly. "Everyone knows it was them." "Knowing isn't the same as proving," Principal Norris sighed. "I've spoken to them, and they deny any involvement." And since there were no witnesses, Olivia left his office feeling defeated. The boys had won. Her project was ruined. Her chance at the science competition was gone, and there would be no consequences for them at all. That evening, Olivia sat alone in her bedroom. She stared at her reflection in the mirror above her desk. The girl who looked back wasn't the same one who had started the week. Something had changed in her eyes. She reached for her laptop and opened it. If the school wouldn't help her, she would help herself. "You don't know me," she whispered to her reflection, "but you're about to." Few people at Westlake High knew much about Olivia Mason. They didn't know that her father, before he retired from the Army, had worked in intelligence. They didn't know that on quiet Sunday afternoons, he had taught his daughter more than just how to play chess. He had taught her how to think 3 steps ahead, how to understand an opponent's weaknesses, how to make a plan and follow it through. Few people knew that Olivia had won 3 regional coding competitions, or that she ran a tech blog under a pen name that had thousands of followers, or that she could build a computer from scratch and had taught herself 3 programming languages just for fun. Olivia had never seen a reason to share these parts of herself at school. Being invisible had always felt safer, but now invisibility had failed to protect her. So perhaps it was time to try something else. Over the weekend, Olivia transformed her bedroom into what her father would have called a command center. She pushed her bed against the wall to make room for a large whiteboard. On it, she began to map out everything she knew about Eric, Pete, and Kyle. She searched their names online and found their social media accounts. None of them had much privacy, protection, so she could see everything they posted. She learned about their families, their interests, their weekend activities. She noted when they complained about teachers or classes. She paid special attention to any posts that broke school rules, like photos of them drinking at parties or skipping class. By Saturday night, Olivia had created detailed profiles of each boy. Eric was the leader but was secretly struggling in most of his classes. He was afraid of failing and not graduating. Pete was the follower who tried to look tough but actually lived with his grandmother who was sick. Kyle was the rich one whose father was planning to run for city council next year on a platform about youth character and values. On Sunday, Olivia moved to phase 2 of her plan. She studied the school handbook, especially the sections about bullying and harassment. She read news articles about similar cases in other schools. She looked up the legal definition of harassment in their state. By Sunday night, she had a 7-day plan mapped out on her whiteboard, with notes for what to do if things didn't go as expected. This wasn't about revenge, she told herself. It was about justice. It was about making sure they never did to anyone else what they had done to her. Olivia's mother knocked on her door that evening, bringing her a cup of hot chocolate. "You've been in here all weekend," she said, looking concerned at the whiteboard covered with notes. "Is everything okay at school?" Olivia considered telling her mother everything. But what would be the point? Her mother would just call the school, and nothing would change. No, this was something Olivia needed to handle herself. "Everything's fine," she said, taking the hot chocolate. "I'm just working on a new project." "A new science project? After what happened to the last one?" "No, not science this time, more like social studies." Her mother still looked worried. "You know you can talk to me if something's bothering you, right?" "I know, Mom. Thanks." Olivia gave her a reassuring smile. But really, everything's going to be fine. After her mother left, Olivia turned back to her plans. She had always been a quiet girl, but her father had once told her something that she kept coming back to now. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It means you choose your moments carefully. This was her moment, and she was going to choose it very carefully indeed. On Monday morning, Olivia dressed with extra care. Instead of her usual jeans and baggy sweater, she wore a simple blue dress that her mother had bought her for her birthday. She put her hair up in a neat ponytail instead of letting it hang in her face as usual. She even put on a little bit of the makeup that had been sitting unused in her drawer. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. She looked confident. She looked strong. As she left for school, she took one last look at her whiteboard. Day 1 of her plan was circled in red. Gather evidence, start the website, talk to Sam. At school, heads turned as Olivia walked down the hallway. Not because she looked dramatically different, but because she was walking with her head up, making eye contact, even smiling at people who looked her way. Several students who had never spoken to her before said hello, and she said hello back. She spotted Eric, Pete, and Kyle by the water fountain. They were laughing about something, probably planning their next mean prank. When they saw her, they nudged each other. "Well, look who's here," Eric called out. "It's nobody, all dressed up with nowhere to go." Olivia did something that shocked them. She smiled directly at them. Not a nervous smile or a scared smile, a calm, knowing smile. Then she walked right past them without saying a word. The smile made them nervous. It should have. During her free period, Olivia went to the computer lab. She logged in and quickly created a new website. She called it Westlake Voices and designed it to look professional. Then she added a simple form where students could anonymously report incidents of bullying. She included a note that all reports would be kept confidential and would be used to create a safer school environment. Next, she created social media accounts for Westlake Voices on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. She used her coding skills to set up a system that would automatically post updates from the website to all the social media accounts at once. By lunchtime, she had her website and social media accounts ready to go. Now she needed to spread the word. She found Sam Rivera in the cafeteria. Sam was the editor of the school newspaper and one of the most respected students at Westlake. He was sitting with his usual group of friends, but Olivia walked right up to their table. "Hi, Sam," she said. "Can I talk to you for a minute? It's important." Sam looked surprised to see Olivia actually speaking to someone, but he nodded and followed her to an empty table. "What's up, Olivia?" he asked. "Everything okay?" "Not really," she said honestly. "But I'm working on making it better. I need your help." She explained about the website she had created and showed it to him on her phone. She didn't mention Eric, Pete, and Kyle specifically, but Sam was smart. He could read between the lines. "So you want me to promote this in the school paper?" he asked when she was done. "Yes," Olivia nodded. "And maybe mention it at the morning announcements tomorrow? You do those on Tuesdays, right?" Sam studied her for a moment. "This is about those new guys, isn't it? The ones who have been messing with you?" Olivia didn't deny it. "It's about them, but it's also about anyone who thinks it's okay to make other people feel small. Don't you think it's time someone did something about it?" Sam slowly nodded. Yeah, I do. Those guys are jerks. I've seen how they treat people. He looked at the website again. This is really good, Olivia. I didn't know you could build websites. There's a lot people don't know about me, she said simply. By the end of the day, Sam had sent out a special digital edition of the school newspaper with a front-page article about the new Westlake Voices website. He encouraged all students to use it to report bullying anonymously. The response was immediate. By the time Olivia got home from school, the website had received 12 reports. 8 of them mentioned Eric, Pete, and Kyle by name. Olivia sat at her desk and looked at her whiteboard. She put a checkmark next to day 1 tasks. Everything was going according to plan. Tomorrow would be day 2. Meet with Mrs. Abbott, start documenting patterns. Olivia smiled to herself. The quiet girl was finding her voice, and soon, everyone at Westlake High would hear it. On Tuesday morning, the entire school was buzzing about the new Westlake Voices website. Students gathered in small groups, whispering and checking their phones. Some looked nervous, others excited. Change was in the air, and everyone could feel. Olivia arrived at school early as usual, but today she had a purpose beyond avoiding crowds. She went straight to the library to find Mrs. Abbott. The kind librarian was arranging books on a cart when Olivia approached her. Good morning, Mrs. Abbott, Olivia said. Do you have a minute to talk? Mrs. Abbott looked up and smiled. For you, Olivia, I always have time. And may I say, you look different today. More present. Olivia smiled back. I feel different. I've decided to stop being invisible. They sat at a quiet table in the corner of the library. Olivia explained about the website she had created and showed Mrs. Abbott some of the reports that had come in. I'm keeping all the reports anonymous, Olivia explained, but I need to establish patterns, show that this isn't just random bad behavior. It's targeted harassment. Mrs. Abbott listened carefully. When Olivia finished, the librarian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You know, in my 30 years at this school, I've seen many bullies come and go. They seem powerful for a while, but they never last. Do you know why? Olivia shook her head. Because bullies are essentially cowards, Mrs. Abbott said. They only have power when others are afraid. When someone stands up to them, really stands up to them, they crumble. She patted Olivia's hand. I'm proud of you for finding your voice. Will you help me? Olivia asked. I need an adult ally. Someone the administration will listen to. Of course I will, Mrs. Abbott said without hesitation. What do you need? For now, just keep your eyes open. Document anything you see, and maybe spread the word about the website to other teachers you trust. As Olivia left the library, she felt stronger than ever. Her plan was working. Day 2 was going well. During her morning classes, Olivia noticed something interesting. Eric, Pete, and Kyle were acting differently. They were quieter, less sure of themselves. They kept checking their phones, frowning at what they saw. Word was spreading, and they were feeling it. At lunch, Olivia did something she hadn't done in months. Instead of hiding in the library, she went to the cafeteria and sat at a table in the middle of the room. She ate her lunch calmly, watching everything around her. Several students she didn't know came up to her table. They had seen her name as the creator of the Westlake Voices website, and they wanted to thank her. Some of them shared their own stories of being bullied. Olivia listened to each one, taking mental notes. Across the cafeteria, Eric, Pete, and Kyle sat at their usual table, but they weren't laughing or joking around as they normally did. They were watching Olivia with wary eyes. She met their gaze directly and gave them that same calm smile from the day before. They looked away first. After school, Olivia went to the newspaper office. Sam was there working on the next edition. Hey, Olivia, he said when he saw her. Your website is blowing up. I've never seen anything spread so fast at this school. That's good, Olivia said. But now we need to take it to the next level. I have an idea for a series of articles about bullying at Westlake. Not just about what's happening now, but about the culture that allows it to happen. She pulled a folder from her backpack and placed it on Sam's desk. I have testimonies from 15 students already, all about the same 3 boys. Sam's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. Wow, this is serious stuff, Olivia. I know, she said. That's why we need to publish it. People need to know they're not alone, that what happened to them wasn't their fault. Sam looked thoughtful. If we publish this, there could be backlash. Those guys have friends, they might come after you even harder. I'm counting on it, Olivia said quietly. Let them try. On Wednesday morning, the first article in Sam's series was published in the school newspaper. It didn't name Eric, Pete, and Kyle directly, but it described incidents that clearly involved them. The article ended with a call for students to report bullying to the Westlake Voices website and to speak up when they saw others being mistreated. During the morning announcements, Principal Norris mentioned that he was aware of concerns about student behavior and that the administration was looking into the matter. He didn't sound very convincing, but it was a start. Olivia checked her whiteboard that morning before leaving for school. Day 3. Assembly speech, security cameras. There was a school assembly scheduled for that afternoon about college applications. At the end of these assemblies, Principal Norris always asked if there were any announcements from students. Usually no one had anything to say. Today would be different. In between classes, Olivia slipped into the hallway where her science project had been destroyed. There were no security cameras in the school hallways. The district said they couldn't afford them. But Olivia had brought her own. It was tiny, barely bigger than a button, and ran on a small battery. She carefully placed it high on the wall, angled to cover most of the hallway. If Eric and his friends tried anything else, she would have proof. The assembly that afternoon was boring, as most school assemblies were. Students shifted in their seats, checked their phones under their desks, and tried not to fall asleep as a speaker from the local community college droned on about application deadlines. Finally, Principal Norris took the microphone. Thank you, Ms. Garcia, for that informative presentation. Now, before we dismiss, are there any announcements from students? This was the moment. Olivia raised her hand. Principal Norris looked surprised but nodded at her. Yes, Olivia. Olivia walked to the front of the gymnasium. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. A month ago, this would have terrified her. Today, it gave her strength. Good afternoon, she began, her voice clear and steady. Many of you know about the Westlake Voices website that launched this week. What you might not know is why it was created. The gym was completely silent now. Everyone was listening. Last week, I did a survey. I asked students if they had experienced bullying at Westlake. 40% said yes. 40% of us have been made to feel unsafe or unwelcome at our own school. She paused to let that sink in. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Principal Norris shifting uncomfortably. The survey also asked students if they had reported the bullying. Only 15% said yes. When I asked why they didn't report it, the most common answer was, nothing would be done anyway. She looked directly at Principal Norris now. I think we can do better than that. I propose we create a student-led anti-bullying committee, a group that works with the administration to make real changes, to create consequences for those who hurt others, to make Westlake a place where everyone feels safe. To her surprise, students began to applaud. Some even stood up. Teachers were nodding in agreement. Principal Norris cleared his throat. That's an excellent suggestion, Olivia. Why don't you come see me tomorrow to discuss the details? Olivia nodded and returned to her seat, her heart pounding with excitement. As she passed by Eric, Pete, and Kyle, she noticed they weren't clapping. They were staring at her with a mixture of confusion and anger. They had thought she was a nobody. They had thought she was powerless. They had been wrong. By Thursday, the tide had turned. Students were openly avoiding Eric, Pete, and Kyle. No one wanted to be associated with the school's most notorious bullies. Teachers were watching them more closely. Even some of their former friends were keeping their distance. Between classes, Olivia made sure to walk past them, still with that unnerving smile, She could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They didn't understand what was happening or how to stop it. After school, she checked the tiny camera she had hidden. No one had found it. Good. She needed it for what came next. Day 4 of her plan was almost complete. Isolation. Preparation for confrontation. Tomorrow would be the final day. The meeting. The evidence. The choice. Olivia was ready. The quiet girl had found her voice, and now everyone was listening. Friday morning arrived with a feeling of finality. 1 week had passed since Eric, Pete, and Kyle had destroyed Olivia's science project. 1 week since they had laughed at her pain and walked away without consequences. But today, everything would change. Olivia dressed carefully in her nicest outfit, a simple blue dress with a cardigan. She checked her backpack to make sure she had everything she needed: her laptop, a USB drive, and a folder of printed documents. Then she headed to school for the last day of her plan. As she walked through the hallways, students greeted her by name. Some gave her high fives or thanked her for creating the Westlake Voices website. In just 1 week, she had gone from being invisible to being one of the most recognized students at school. It felt strange, but not unpleasant. During her morning classes, Olivia was quieter than usual. She was focused on what was coming at lunch, the final confrontation. She had planned every detail, considered every possible outcome. Now it was time to see if it would work. When the lunch bell rang, Olivia took a deep breath and headed to the cafeteria. She spotted Eric, Pete, and Kyle at their usual table. They were alone today. No one else wanted to sit with them anymore. Olivia walked directly to their table and stood there waiting for them to notice her. When they did, Eric sneered at her. "What do you want, nobody?" he asked, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "I need to talk to you," Olivia said calmly. "All 3 of you, after school today, in the library study room." Pete laughed, but it sounded forced. "Why would we want to talk to you?" Olivia pulled a USB drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Because this contains all the evidence I've gathered this week, including footage from the hidden camera I installed after you destroyed my project." Their faces paled as they realized what she was saying. "Hidden camera?" Kyle repeated, his voice cracking. "What are you talking about?" "I think you know," Olivia said. "The same way you know about the 15 students who have reported you by name on the Westlake Voices website. The same way you know about the article series that will continue in the school newspaper next week, with more details about what you've done." Eric tried to look tough. "So what? It's just a stupid website, no one cares." "Principal Norris cares," Olivia said. "Especially after our meeting this morning where I showed him some of what I've collected. And Mrs. Abbott cares, and Sam Rivera cares. And the 417 students who have visited the website care." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But maybe you're right. Maybe no one important cares. Maybe your parents won't care when they see everything. Maybe the college admissions officers won't care. Maybe Kyle's dad won't care how this might affect his city council campaign." Kyle's eyes widened at the mention of his father. "Study room. After school, just the 4 of us," Olivia said. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the USB drive on their table. It was actually empty. The real evidence was safely stored in multiple places, but they didn't need to know that. Throughout the afternoon, Olivia could feel the tension building. Eric, Pete, and Kyle kept looking at her during the classes they shared. They whispered to each other, clearly trying to figure out what to do. When the final bell rang, Olivia went straight to the library study room. Mrs. Abbott gave her an encouraging nod as she passed the checkout desk. Olivia set up her laptop and arranged her documents on the table. Then she waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Olivia began to wonder if they would show up at all. But just as she was considering packing up, the door opened. Eric walked in, first followed by Pete and Kyle. They looked nervous but also angry. "Sit down," Olivia said, gesturing to the chairs across from her. Surprisingly, they did as she asked. The power balance had shifted, and they all knew it. "What do you want from us?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia had prepared for this moment. 3 things, she said calmly. First, you'll help clean up the science lab every day for a month. Mr. Garner has already agreed to supervise. She watched their faces. None of them looked happy, but they didn't object. Second, you'll each write sincere apologies to everyone you've bullied. I have a list. She pushed a piece of paper toward them. There are 27 names on it. Pete picked up the list and scanned it. His face showed a mix of shame and surprise. Perhaps he hadn't realized just how many students they had hurt. And third, you'll participate in the anti-bullying program I'm developing with Principal Norris. You'll attend all the meetings and help plan activities. You'll be part of the solution instead of the problem. Kyle leaned forward. And if we don't? He challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. Olivia smiled that smile again. Then on Monday I release everything I have to the school board, local media, and your parents. I'm particularly sure your father would be interested, Kyle, considering he's running for city council on a youth character platform. The 3 boys looked at each other. Their resistance was crumbling visibly. We didn't mean for it to go so far, Eric said finally. It was just supposed to be jokes. Jokes are funny, Olivia replied. What you did wasn't funny. It was cruel. There was a long silence. Then, one by one, they agreed to her terms. Eric first, then Pete, and finally Kyle. How do we know you'll keep your word? Pete asked. How? Do we know you won't release that stuff anyway? Because unlike you, I keep my promises, Olivia said. If you do these 3 things, genuinely and completely, then what happened stays between us. If you don't, she let the threat hang in the air. As they left the study room, Olivia felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that her plan had worked. Pride in what she had accomplished. But also a kind of sadness. Not for Eric, Pete, and Kyle. They had made their choices and would face the consequences. No, she felt sad that it had come to this at all. That she had needed to go to such lengths just to be treated with basic respect. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. The boys, initially participating in the anti-bullying program out of fear, began to show genuine change. Eric discovered he had a talent for public speaking and became an effective advocate against bullying. Pete's artistic abilities found purpose in designing campaign materials. Even Kyle, the most resistant, eventually admitted that the program had changed his perspective. At the semester's end, Principal Norris announced that reported bullying incidents at Westlake High had decreased by 63%. The Westlake Voices website was now an official school resource, with Olivia as its student administrator. The anti-bullying committee met weekly and had started programs with other schools in the district. During the end-of-semester assembly, Principal Norris invited Eric, Pete, and Kyle to the stage to recognize their contributions to the new school culture. The audience applauded as the boys described what they had learned and how they had changed. Olivia stood at the back of the auditorium, watching silently. Mrs. Abbott found her there. I told you quiet voices can carry weight, the librarian said. With a smile, Olivia nodded. It wasn't about making them beg, she confided. It was about making them see. As she walked home that day, students greeted her by name. Some asked for her advice on their problems. Others thanked her for making the school a better place. She was no longer invisible, but now being seen was entirely on her terms. That evening, Olivia sat at her desk and looked at her whiteboard. All the plans and strategies were still there, evidence of what she had accomplished. She picked up an eraser and wiped it clean. She wouldn't need it anymore. Then she opened her laptop and began to type a new post for the Westlake Voices website. True strength, she wrote, isn't about power over others. It's about standing up for what's right even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. The quiet girl had found her voice. And it turned out to be louder than anyone, even herself, had expected.